Joining me now, as always, CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, this does seem significant that business leaders, in addition to top health officials, are urging President Trump to get up to speed, much more testing before allowing or pushing individuals to go back to work to reopen the economy.
No question. I mean, testing has been the priority, will continue to be the priority as we try and reopen the economy. There's no question about it. And now we know that there are people who can even shed this virus, Jake, spread the virus even before they develop symptoms. We know that people in the past who are asymptomatic, never develop any symptoms, can spread it. And now we know the most vulnerable time for people who do develop symptoms is before they even get sick. They need to be tested. They have no idea. Right now, I think the question that should be asked, I think there's plenty of, it sounds like there's more and more tests out there. The labs are doing fewer tests and more people want to get tested. So what's going on here? People want the test. The testing is available. There's no backlog. What's going on there? Something in between is broken. Everyone in the country should be able to answer this question. Right now, if you wanted to get tested, would you know exactly what to do? Could you get the results back in a day? Everyone in the country should be able to answer yes to that question before we can really reopen the country.
Let's dive into some of the points you just made. The first one you referred to, you alluded to a study published today in the journal Nature Medicine, finding that people actually might be most infectious, meaning most able to infect other people with the coronavirus before they actually show any symptoms, which adds to this growing body of evidence that seemingly healthy people are really spreading the virus to a large degree. What should people watching at home do, if anything, with this information?
You know what they should do, Jake? It's probably the thing that you and I talked about, I think, 6 weeks ago now. I remember still on your program, and we said people need to behave like they have the virus. That's been the point. That was the point then. It's still the point. You may not know you have it. You may never develop symptoms, or you may not have yet developed symptoms, but not only could you be infectious, you could even be more so than when you get sick. And this also speaks to contact tracing. Think about like everybody that you may have come in contact with after you were sick, maybe a smaller number because hopefully you stayed home. But do you know everyone you came in contact with for the 3 days before you started to develop symptoms? It's going to make this process really challenging. But again, that needs to be in place before we can start opening the country again.
Also really shows the importance of testing if you're most infectious when you don't have any symptoms at all. Eliminating the social distancing restrictions or physical distancing restrictions would obviously rely to a large degree on there being some sort of vaccine. The lead NIH scientist on the vaccine, Dr. Corbett, said yesterday that NIH hopes to have something ready for frontline workers, meaning healthcare workers and EMTs and police and the like, by the fall with a larger public rollout next spring. Is that timeline realistic? That seems kind of like good news.
Yeah, it does seem like good news. I mean, I was part of that interview with her. I mean, she seemed confident, but there's a lot of caveats, Jake. I mean, the vaccine's got to still be proven to be safe and proven to be effective. What I got the sense, Jake, there's 3 phases. There's phase 1, which is safety, phase 2, which is effectiveness, and phase 3, where you do the really large trials of lots of people to make sure it holds up. My sense was that maybe after phase 2, as part of an emergency use, they may allow this to start being used in healthcare workers, maybe as part of a trial. But she seemed pretty confident by next spring it should be available for the general public, which would be good news. I mean, vaccines can take up to 10 years to make, Jake, so this is a pretty rapid schedule.
Very rapid. And Sanjay, you also referred to this, the daily number of COVID-19 tests performed by commercial labs has declined in the past week. Even though demand is only increasing. Do we have any idea why this is?
I think there may still be too strict a criteria for who can get tested. I mean, the criteria have been all over the place, but now it's saying people who only have symptoms should get tested. As we were just talking about, obviously a lot of people may not have any symptoms or may not yet have symptoms and they need to be tested. So I think ultimately, if we say testing is widely available, for the individual out there, it's got to mean as they watch this, they know exactly who to call or where to go or have someone come to their house even or have an in-home test or something that they can get tested. Everyone in the country should be able to answer the question, would you know how to get tested right now if you had to? And I think the majority of people still don't know that. I still get calls from healthcare workers in some places, Jake, where they still have a hard time getting tested. So numbers have gone up, but it's not widely sort of distributed or applied around the country.
The FDA has now approved at least 3 different tests for antibodies, which theoretically detect whether or not somebody has been exposed to the virus and recovered from it. If you have had the virus, we talked about this yesterday, but just to reiterate, if you have had the virus, if you test positive for antibodies in your system, we don't necessarily know, because this coronavirus is so new, so novel, we don't necessarily know that it means that you're then free and clear and you can never get it again, but that's the hope. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that's the hope, and I think if you talk to most, infectious disease doctors, they'll say presumably that's the case. You should have some immunity against this because that is how other viruses and even similar viruses have behaved. We don't know how strong that immunity will be, and we don't know how long. By the way, I just got to say, you brought up Dr. Corbett earlier, who's spearheading the vaccine. I said, well, how do we know the vaccine will work then? Because of this, we don't know if the antibodies are protective. And she said the vaccine is going to be totally different. Because it'll have been tested, it'll give you the longer and stronger protection than the antibodies you get from becoming infected. So she was drawing a distinction between the vaccine that hopefully will be available by this time next year versus just getting infected. Because a lot of people say, why don't I just get infected? I'll be protected that way. The vaccine is a much better approach.
Yeah, I mean, also, you might get killed by the coronavirus. As we've seen, it's deadlier than the regular
and you could get really
influenza.
Sick. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And even if you don't die from it, you can get very, very sick. There are a lot of accounts of people who have survived it who are still really, really hurting. California Governor Gavin Newsom laid out what the new normal could look like in California and across the country as social distancing is eased. Temperature checks at restaurants, waiters wear gloves at restaurants, tables are set up 6 feet apart, limited large gatherings. Is this what Americans should prepare for when we talk about the new normal, that we're not really, at least in the next year or so, going to go back to what things were like?
I think there's going to be an incremental changes in society. I don't think it's going to go back to normal right away by any means. I think it ultimately will, though, Jake. I mean, that's one thing. There'll be some things that maybe are going to be forever different, but I think for the most part, at some point, I think it will go back to normal. 2 reasons. One is I think the vaccine will make a big difference. And 2 is that Jake, you've covered news for a long time. We do have incredibly short memories. As powerful and indelible seemingly this experience is right now, people do forget and move on at some point, Jake.
Well, maybe. I mean, we're still taking our shoes off at airports. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.